Welcome back to Burnout Break Room, the podcast that's like a break room, but helpful, where we look at burnout through a realistic lens, talk about ways to take a break from the grind, and spill the tea.
I'm Caitlin Truhella, creativity coach and speaker.
I'm Lyndie Larimore, a licensed therapist, certified career coach, and burnout coach, and we're your hosts. Thank you for joining us here in the Burnout Break Room. Hi, Caitlin. How have you been this week?
Hey, Lindy. I'm good. Definitely been leaning into our journal prompt and talking about letting go. And it's almost like the universe hears the conversation and is like, oh, so you want to talk about, this new thing that you're learning? I'm going to give you more opportunities to learn that lesson.
Yes, I could not agree more. I will say, just off the top, I want to make a recommendation for another podcast. The universe gave me the podcast this morning, IMO, in my opinion, Michelle Obama. So great.
Mm.
And I was listening to one today about where she was interviewing Jay Shetty. I highly recommend this because it does a great job of kind of touching on burnout. But one of the things, and we'll talk more about this, is Michelle Obama said, one of the things I had to learn in life was to stop checking off the boxes, basically to stop doing things just to check off a box and to say that I did it. So that was my lesson from the universe today.
Oh my gosh, that means so much. Yeah, I think it's definitely important to be able to check in and understand where we're just checking the box rather than, actually going through the full experience rather than just going through the motions. Yeah, that's a great recommendation.
Mm, yeah, highly recommended.
And fortunately, we are joined today by our amazing guest, Mayuri Ramkolowan, who is the owner of Creative Wellness Studio in Pretoria, South Africa. Mayuri is a creative healer, a printmaker, holistic health coach, and a sound healer. And looking into her practice, I know she talks a lot about different forms of meditation, and we are so happy to have her here with us today. Mayuri, can you tell us a little bit about your expertise?
Hi. Yes, thank you for having me. And yeah, I guess the expertise would be a difficult one to pinpoint because it varies so much from, the art background to health coaching thereafter. But really just the main point would be teaching people how to slow down, teaching myself how to slow down, to be present in the moment and not to be acting out of an emotion, so acting out of fear, acting out of anxiety, and running our life through those thoughts and ways, and really just becoming more conscious of who you are and where you're at.
Absolutely. And would you say that one of the biggest realizations we can have on that journey is where we are just checking the box, where we are not living our full experience? Like what would you say is the first step to that realization?
Well, I mean, just bringing an awareness to checking off the box, right? So
Mm,
you've got your daily list, if it's that, or the weekly or yearly or 5 yearly checkbox that you've got. And if you're just waking up and sort of just getting stuff done, I think the first step is bringing awareness to this is what I'm doing.
mm,
And then starting to dig a little bit deeper. But I think, even just spending a month becoming conscious of each thing that you're ticking off and then starting to ask, okay, why is this on my list? But yeah, I mean, there's so much that can happen thereafter. But just the basic awareness and presence of actually having that list.
Mm.
I, I really appreciate what you said about the why, right? I'm thinking about a major life change that I had in the last year, which was leaving a more kind of corporate job in leadership to do my own thing. And part of that really involved connecting with my why and why am I checking off these boxes? Is it just because it looks good on a resume? Is it just because I'm trying to prove something to who even knows who, including myself? But I'm wondering, Mayuri, what is, if you wouldn't mind telling us a little bit about your journey into what you're doing now and your why, if you don't mind sharing that.
Of course, I think my why is quite layered.
Mm,
as I think everybody's is. And, in each moment in time, there's a specific why. So obviously, there's a few that got me to where I am now, but it definitely, I know that this top podcast is about burnout and all of that. I wouldn't say at that point that I realized that maybe that was part of the journey until probably quite recently, actually. And this is maybe 10 years ago that everything started to, shift for me. I think so much of who we are flows into what we do. So whether it is
mm,
the tasks that are sitting on our checkbox, or whether it is that you're creative, so I mean, Caitlin, you're a writer, so much of who you are flows into your words, right? So as me as an artist, so much of who I am at my core, and who I was 10, 20 years ago was pouring into the work that I was creating. And when that core is not enough,
mm,
or you're sitting in this, why am I even doing this? And there's no clarity and there's no confidence in who you are at your core. Not just a fleeting sort of thought in that moment, but at your core, if that's who you are, then that's going to step into the work. That's going to flow into the work, and that's going to be the natural sort of feeling of everything that you create. And whether it is your home, your garden, the food that you cook, that energy of who you are is flowing into that, right? And I think once I realized that my what I was creating was not making me happy because it was a reflection of who I was at my core, I think that then became, if I can say, my why of really trying to, and I really don't want to use this word, but fix, shift, who I was at my core, and heal, and sort of, really come to terms with the things that got me to that point, making peace with the things that got me to that point, of that who is who I was as a young adult, and then learning how to change that. And that 20 years ago, 10 years ago, was quite a tough thing to do when you don't really have the guidance or the tools to do so. And so it was kind of a natural trial and error of figuring out, why am I like this? Why did I become like this? And why have I been unable to step out of it on my own? And really kind of learning how to better myself in simple ways. Obviously, that's not how I did it at first. It was like the hardcore, like cut everything off as it is. I'm not doing this anymore, and I'm this person. And that doesn't always work. Does for some people, but it didn't for me, because I would always find myself in a spin of something bad would happen or something stressful would happen, and I'd revert back to that old version of myself, the not enough, very critical of every little thing that I was doing. And so I think my why specifically is really just about stepping away from that version of myself and knowing that no matter how much work I do, when things are overwhelming and when they are stressful, my brain is going to revert to that old pattern. It's going to revert to that old version of myself. And that's got to be okay. But it doesn't mean I have to follow through with that behavior or those thought patterns. It's about learning, how to change that. And so I think the why is just really is having compassion, or sort of kindness to that version of myself, and wanting to shift that so that as each year goes by, it's easier to live this life.
Mm. That is so incredibly powerful, Mayuri. And I made specifically a note about what you said a moment ago. Who we are pours into our work. And of course, if we are not aligned with the work that we're doing, going back to what we were talking about with the list, if we are honest with ourselves in asking who made this list or who is this list for, then we can determine if it is aligned with us or not.
Yeah, definitely. I think, even just the idea of a list drives me a little nuts. Um, and I think once we are in alignment with who we want to be and what we want to be creating, we don't really need that list because it kind of flows out of us naturally.
Mm.
I love it. It's so powerful. If we're truly aligned, if our work is truly aligned with our purpose and who we are, then it just flows naturally. And I'm thinking of the other side of that, right? Like I think I can safely say that all three of us have had a shift in our lives that have moved us closer to our purpose and our why. And I feel so privileged to lead a life where I everything I do is aligned with my purpose. I mean, that what an incredible privilege. And now I'm in that fun place where I'm trying to figure out how to clock out of my purpose.
Ah, the joy.
Right.
Hmm.
I mean, what an incredible problem to have, right? And
Yeah.
I know our topic today is clocking out. Now it's my time. I found it easier when it was a 9 to 5 and I was literally clocking out from something, or, I had that barrier of driving home or stepping away. And now when it's my purpose and I have passion about everything, I find it much harder to turn it off. And I use mindfulness as a way I find when I'm truly in the moment, I'm less thinking about lists and everything, but I'm curious to tap into some of your wisdom, some of your thoughts on that.
Oh, it's such a special place to be, I think, because
Mhm.
it's humorous in a little way, right? Like, I mean, you left this corporate chaotic, probably micromanager of a boss or something like that, that was ruling your life, to do something as beautiful as running your own business or fulfilling your purpose, and then you find yourself in the same spiral of not clocking out, of maybe approaching burnout, and you're just like, okay, but how is this happening again? I thought this
Yes.
is what I stepped away from, right? And so I think just having a little bit of clarity there, and knowing that this is not forever, number one, because you're not doing a 9 to 5 until retirement. You are serving a purpose here. This is different. And yes, when we start our own business, if you take it from an entrepreneurial perspective, the first couple of years are hard. It's a grind, and it's not about hustling or sort of, making sure you're gonna burn out because otherwise you're not gonna be successful. But it's hard. It's hard because you're shifting from that mindset of the tasks being given to you as actually having to create the tasks from scratch, and to this, it's a lot of work, right? So it's a big shift. And I think knowing that maybe even just that clocking out or that burnout is gonna be there because your brain is adjusting to a different way of life, a different way of work, right? Because now your work is your life, literally.
Mhm.
And so understanding that that shift is natural, it's hard, and maybe, and I'm not saying that you're never going to clock out, right? Or but I think there is a little step of acceptance that it is going to be tougher to clock out, and that maybe clocking out is not going to be, I'm at home now, so this is home time. Work stays at work. It's
Mhm.
not going to be like that. And it's actually looking at it differently, in the sense that I'm going to meditate for 20 minutes now. And so that is my clocking out. And I'm going to make sure I do that 3 times a day. I'm going to make sure I take 10 long, conscious, wholesome breaths before I sit down at the table and eat my meal, right? And that's your time to clock out. Your phone is face downwards. You're not checking emails while you're eating. You're not doing a social media post while you're eating. And you're not stalking your competitors while you're eating, right? So that is your way to clock out. Making sure those meals, whether it's 2 meals, whether it's 1 meal, or whether it's 3 meals that you're having in the day, is to make sure you're nourishing your body in a conscious way. And that is your clock out. The meditation is your clock out. Being in the garden, man, that is my clock out. Like, my phone stays in the house. Okay, fine, I bring it sometimes because it's content, so I can't take videos of the garden. But usually that's not when I'm actually gardening. It's when I'm walking through the garden with my tea or my coffee, and then it's more from like an admiration perspective. And I'm like, oh my gosh, look at all my veggies that I grew. And it's like motivating myself. And then that goes onto Instagram, right? Like
Mhm.
that. But when I'm in the garden, the phone's not even visible. And I'm trying to focus on my hands in the soil, pruning the garden. It's a new season, like we're going into winter here, so I'm getting rid of stuff. I'm pulling out all the dead leaves. I'm making space, and I'm nourishing the soil, and I'm thinking about how am I going to put my frosting cloths, and like I'm focusing and being conscious in the garden, because that is my clock out time. Because I promise you, as soon as I step out of the garden, I'm already thinking, oh yeah, I was supposed to do that for the studio tomorrow, or it's all of those kind of things. And so finding those things that work for you, that allow you to clock out, and shifting that mindset from that 8 to 5 that you were so used to having, that home is home. If I'm at dinner, I'm at dinner. And we're not talking work. Whereas you might, if you have a partner or a child or a best friend, and you're going out for coffee or something with them, it might be fulfilling and soul feeling to actually talk about this new business that you're working on, or the new client that's coming into your life, because this is your life. This is what you're doing. And if you're in a purpose driven, as in like helping people, business, you want to share those stories. You want to share the wins that you've had and the growth that you're having in your business, because that's your own personal growth. And I'm not saying that your personal growth is tied to a business growing, but when it's your own business, that's just you and maybe your assistant, or somebody that helps with stuff. It really is all of you, and you want to be sharing that with your friends. So it's not that you don't want to bring that to the dinner table or the coffee table or your walk in the park together. I talk to my dog. So it's not like I don't want to talk about work to my dog. It's just that this is me, man. And we have to find other ways to clock out. That's my story about that.
Absolutely. And this is also incredible and insightful. And in some ways I certainly feel called out as an entrepreneur, especially, when because there are so many different parts of our experience and what we do on the day to day that, to your point, like in the garden, can be turned into content. But you're absolutely right, because clocking out really has to be intentional. It is an intentional step away to breathe and, recenter and have those practices that refill us. Because even though we're working in our purpose and in our passions, we're still human, and there's more aspects of our life than just one thing that we're doing. So I absolutely love that.
I have to say, Mayuri, I almost am forgetting that this is a podcast and that I just feel so like fed by what you're saying. It's so speaking to the moment for me. I'm almost making note of, like, I want to be able to go back and listen to this podcast for myself, based on what you're saying. Because
Love
you're
that.
so, I also feel so called out. In fact, that, I have that theme today around like checking off the boxes, or I wrote down this idea of like the difference between who I want to look like in the world versus who I want to be in the world, as in what's driving me. Like when we talk about creating content, or this idea of how do I turn it all off when we are not only entrepreneurs, but entrepreneurs that are trying to create a presence online.
Yeah.
Everything feels like I'm Lyndie in this moment, but I'm also Lyndie, the coach and consultant and therapist. And how can I make that person look really good with this Instagram filter or whatever? And Mayuri, what you're talking about is just, and I'm thinking when you were talking about who we are at our core, and and does that feel good enough? I just feel so called out by like when we put our phone aside, we're almost faced with, okay, now I'm just Lyndie. And
Mm.
am I okay with just being Lyndie at my core? And I think that's why mindfulness is both so powerful and so intimidating, I think, at first, because we are faced with really looking in, even if it's just a walk in the garden. I'm walking in the garden as Lyndie.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah. As Lindy, and maybe barefoot, and the grass doesn't actually feel so nice on my feet because it's early morning and it's cold, and all of those thoughts, like It's not something that we do consciously. It's we walk in the garden, but we're thinking of the checkbox. We're thinking of everything else that needs to be done, rather than literally. People think I'm crazy when I make them walk on the grass, and I'm like, how does it feel between your toes?
Mm.
Is it tickly? Is it this? And they kind of just look at me and they're like, what? And I'm like, that's what I want you to do when you're at home or when you're walking in the park, is to be conscious of everything. It's the easiest way to become mindful, is to focus on every little aspect. And I'm sorry that you felt called out. It's not to to make you feel, any sorts of those kind of feelings, but it is really to bring an awareness to the shift of who we think we need to be.
Mm. I love your example to Mayuri of walking on the grass, something as, simple as like bringing awareness and consciousness to one form of sensation. There's a writing coach, Natalie Goldberg. She does a lot of different workshops surrounding, different writing practices, and she uses different meditative approaches. But one of the ones that I read about, she talks so much about the success of this format, but I have to admit it sounds like it would be one of the most difficult things to do. She has writers walk in a circle, just in a regular size room. It doesn't necessarily have to be outside, but she talks about the instruction being that you walk so slow that you consider every moment of like the your heel touching the ground to then midfoot, then the toes, and just taking very intentional, almost excruciatingly slow steps in that same way of bringing awareness and attention to the moment and your motion as well as a part of the writing process.
So this actually just made me think. So I've got a 5-year-old, and she goes to a Montessori school. So I don't know if you're familiar with the Montessori way of teaching, and the way that they set up their classrooms and that. And in all their classrooms, it doesn't matter the age group, they have a white tape that makes a line on the mat in the room, and it goes all the way around, so on the outer edge of the mat. And between major shifts in their day, so when they come into the classroom, they have to take their lunch boxes and whatnot, and they do that. Then the other shift is, between activities. So they have like a morning circle, and then they have to go and do activities. So between these moments, they have to walk the line. So they have their order that they have, and I think it's the age wise. Um, and they have to stand on the white line. Their shoe has to be on the white line, in those lines, and they have to focus. And for a 5-year-old to walk for 4 minutes or 3 minutes, however long it takes them, that is super concentration and presence, right? Taking them, and they walk slowly, and they're not allowed to talk. They've got to look at their feet, and they've got to be mindful of walking one in front of the other until they come all the way around. Then they slowly go into the next task. And that whole idea is about leaving behind the play energy of being in the playground, and now you're coming to do your activity. Or the high-paced energy of the morning circle where they're all singing and Mr. Sun, whatever, and all the joy of that, and telling their weekend stories, or um, into, okay, now we're going to focus, and now it's drawing time, or whatever 5-year-olds do. And that, I mean, if we could take that into our lives for 3 minutes. I mean, 3 minutes sounds like nothing, but 3 minutes is long when you have 20 emails to send, and you've just gotten off a call where you've had an argument with a partner in your business, or your mom is telling you all the things that you should have done yesterday. you know, I think it's amazing. I think what she's doing is amazing, to get adults to do that, to bring a presence towards themselves.
You just taught me something about clocking out because and a reminder of why it's so wonderful that we get to be doing this work of this entrepreneurial work and be our own bosses. It's like, oh, I can clock out whenever I want to. And it might just be a trip to my living room. I live in the northeastern part of America near Boston, and it's been really rainy lately. And so today was one of the first sunny mornings, so I just went on a long bike ride. So I got to start my day out by clocking out and really kind of being mindful. So I thank you for that reminder and thank, your daughter's school for the reminder that we have opportunities throughout the day to clock out because we can set our own schedule.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I definitely echo that sentiment too, because, especially in the entrepreneurial space, we set our own schedules, we set the rules and how we want to operate. And so the idea that we have to work within whether it's a 9 to 5 or a specific time or a way of working is possibly coming from that old mentality. So it's very liberating in so many ways to have that realization. And I really appreciate that, you bring that perspective here too. And going a little bit into our journal prompt about in what ways are we letting go. One of the ways that I practiced that this week was similar to this mentality. I was just having the hardest time focusing and concentrating on what I was doing. And normally the idea to stop working and do something else, something, even moderately self-indulgent as, sketching for a minute or doing some kind of art was unheard of. It's like, no, this is during the workday. Like this is work time. But even just taking 30 minutes, 45 minutes to do something like that was the perfect clocking out, even just for a moment, to let go of all those expectations and I'm not even sure exactly how to describe it, but yeah, it was so liberating in that moment to be able to take a break, recenter, and realign with, what was most important in that moment.
Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah.
Mayuri, I'm curious to hear about your experience with journaling about letting go.
I sat with it for a little bit, and I think it's become such a natural part of my life that I actually had to to think about it. I had to sit and write a little bit to bring that consciousness back in. And I think I've been setting boundaries, hard boundaries, for so many years that I think that was kind of where my focus was, in the sense of this is how I'm going to be able to let go, you know? The only way I'm going to be able to let go is if I'm firm with my boundaries. There was such a harshness towards my energy of how to let go of the past, of situations, of experiences, of people. And I think the pushback that generally comes with setting boundaries, the anxiety that comes with it, a little bit of fear, it makes it a little bit longer and tougher. And so you sit in that energy of being firmer even with the boundaries. And I think as I began to see that those boundaries were now actually in place, whether the person or the situation or the environment approved of it or not, I realized that that was not actually letting go. That was just teaching me how to create energy and space for myself, and to be able to create space to be myself, so that I then had the power and the strength to actually learn how to let go. And then it was about understanding that forgiveness was not for the other person, or giving them the pedestal to say I forgive you, you're free of what you did to me, or how you treated me. It was actually for myself. The forgiveness was there for myself, to let go of that cord that was, keeping them in my life, or keeping that energy in my life, or keeping the energy of that situation in my life. And once I let go of needing to forgive them as a such, and understanding that forgiving the situation as a whole and forgiving what I allowed was more important, I was then able to focus on the peace that I needed to bring in my life. And I think letting go, and how I have managed to let go and how I continue to let go, because trauma continues to come into our lives and flames continue to get thrown at us. And, how I continue to let go is actually with the energy of peace and love. So, without sounding too hippie and, peace and love, bro, it is really just about that. It is really just about intentionally every single day saying, I'm going to approach this day with peace in my heart and peace in my energy. And when I meditate, it is really and about that. And it's not to say I don't lose my shit or get angry or am frustrated, because I believe me, I can be super frustrated sometimes. It's about just not letting that then run my life for 2 weeks, and saying, okay, it happened. I got angry. I am frustrated that this happened, but I understand it's out of my control. And, sort of understanding and having compassion for either yourself or the other party involved or just the environment that is out of your control. And I can just create peace for myself, and hopefully that will have a ripple effect to the world around me. And that has really been a powerful part of my learning in letting go, and how I continue to try and let go on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. That is, I love what you talk about in terms of setting boundaries and this idea of finding a balance between, as you said, being very regimented with the boundaries and, wanting to hold those and how much energy that takes. And it reminds me so much of the approach, whether you're looking at, because of course, diligence and discipline, they do have a place in our lives. But what I hear you saying is when we approach who we are and these boundaries and the way that we live our lives, when we approach them with more of a devotion, then we approach these situations with love. And again, being ourselves in that love and being able to operate in a place of allowing ourselves to reconcile with those things. And very much, as you were also talking about, forgiving people so that we are allowed to let go of those things, that happened in our past, so that we are a person who makes life happen and not a person that life just happens to.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. I think there's just so much power in just that, in that choice, that I'm making the choices and I'm choosing to be in control of how I feel on a daily basis.
It is a very conscious practice and very important.
I very much align with I think there's more to talk about with boundaries, and I've found in my years as a therapist, I've shifted how I talk about boundaries, and I think it's because I've just gotten older, and I'm realizing it's very much in line with what you're talking about. Like I think at first, especially when I was younger, it just felt so empowering and so liberating to just allow myself to say no. And the fact that I could have boundaries just felt so incredible. And then the fact that I could heal in that way, like it was a form of healing for me. And now I find myself thinking of boundaries more along the lines that I'm stealing this from somewhere. I don't know where. So forgive me, but thinking of boundaries as saying no to say yes. And what does the yes look like? So now when I'm talking with the people that I work with, it's about the boundaries, but then it's quickly about, okay, well, what does your life look like with the boundaries in place? But also, like, how are you giving to that other person as well? Like, what are you able to give, even if it's to the person that with whom you are setting boundaries? Like, how do you become more available, and what are you doing with that availability? And how are you showing compassion as you're setting the boundary? So it feels like I've just gotten older and more loosey goosey, kind of like you were saying, like that peace and love dude, you know? But so I just so align, and I feel like it's such an important part of conversations, we're talking about clocking out, we're talking about boundaries. There's also that piece of like, yes, it's really great to have boundaries for sure, but how are you also having compassion for yourself and for the people with whom you are setting the boundaries? And if that means the hard boundary of no, like 100% no, you're not in my life anymore, how are you showing up with compassion for yourself and maybe even potentially experiencing some forgiveness?
Yeah, I think it's a tough one, especially the compassion for the person on the receiving end of the no.
Mm.
Because often, there's either fear or anxiety of the reaction. And, also if it comes with a loaded sort of energy in the sense that that person has been asking X, Y, and Z from
Yeah,
you or of you for
yeah,
umpteen years, and now you're standing tall and saying, no,
yeah.
actually. I can't or I won't.
Mhm.
I mean, from personal experience, I've said no, and the reaction has been disastrous. It's been intense. The shouting and the why now and what, who do you think you are, blah blah blah. And you kind of, I think when you get to that point of knowing that you have to say no to this for yourself and for your sanity, and not because you physically can't do the thing. I think there's a different level of consciousness. And so you're probably, and this is a big assumption, at a point where you are in control of your emotions, right? So, or somewhat in control of your emotions. So you're not going to take that reaction personally. And you're also not going to be as reactive in return. And I remember this so clearly, and this is a specific incident I'm even thinking of, is I was in my office and I was on my phone, and this person is screaming at me on the phone. And I didn't even say no. I just said, "Can I get back to you on that?" And the swearing and the screaming, I'm a very gentle person. Like I don't even react like that on a normal, when it's warranted. But I remember it was the first time that it happened like this. Normally I would burst into tears as soon as I put the phone down, or I would get extreme, like my heart would start racing, or I'd get red in the face, or I would struggle to even get a message across. Whereas I just kind of stood there and looked out into my garden from my window, and I let this person run their mouth, and I just said, okay. I didn't actually say no. I said, could I get back to you on that? And that triggered him even more. And he said some really hurtful, silly things. And I just said, all right, we'll have another conversation later. And I'm sorry that this was like this. I didn't really have like real words for him, and kind of put the phone down and carried on with my day. And 2 hours later, he called me back and he said, I'm really sorry I overreacted and I value our relationship, and can we talk about this another time? And I was like, cool, no issues. And I put the phone down. But the fact that that comes back to my mind, it means it did hurt. Those words obviously did hurt, but I was able to access an energy that was compassionate, or rather calm, but also understanding. When I say compassionate, like, I mean, it's not like I was like, oh, I'm sorry you're upset, and I know this is hard for you. It was none of that. It was more from the point of he's experiencing what he's experiencing. And this is upsetting because he's not feeling, I don't know, taken care of, or like I've got his back, or whatever it is he needed to feel from me, right? Whatever it is he lacks in himself, right? That he needs to feel that validation from other people, or that support from other people. And I think I saw that so clearly already. And so it was easier for me to access that compassion and to say, okay, just let him be. Let him be. Let him let this energy out of his system. I mean, I don't know if I would have been the same if he was actually in front of me swearing and shouting, because that's obviously different. But I know in the past, if that had happened on the phone, before that, I would have really just hung up and started crying and what's happening to me and why do people treat me like this? And I think that that's why it's so difficult to access that compassion to the other person. But like you say, when you can, and when you get to that point of saying, I need to be more compassionate, I need to be more peace, I am compassionate and I am peaceful, then it naturally becomes easier to balance it out for the person and the situation on the other side.
I was just going to say, this is bringing to mind conversations that I've had in therapeutic circles because I'm thinking about, I mean, what a powerful example of tapping into your own power. That was one of the most empowered things I could have imagined was for you to just be like, yep, as if, as if you're like a cloud in the sky. I guess that cloud's feeling a little rainy today. You're going to pass by. I know, like, you were very much, it sounds like coming from a place of your own value and worth and recognizing that he could not dictate any part of your value and worth. And I've also had conversations with therapists where I try to also be very mindful of who I am in the therapeutic space. Like, I would never tell anyone, like, you should forgive that person, or like, you should have compassion for this person who is like really racist against you or really homophobic or something,
Yeah.
because not my place to say. And I don't feel like forgiveness is ever a thing that you should do or you're supposed to do, or anyone should, it has the right to tell you to forgive someone. And yet you just had such a powerful example of when we have compassion for ourselves, when we are sitting in our own worth, then when we are treated in a way that is not aligned with how we view ourselves, we don't have to give that person power because we recognize we have our own worth and power separate from that. And we can just kind of say, I guess we don't have much to talk about anymore. And have a great day and hang up.
Yeah, cool, bro. What's for tea? Like, it's just,
Exactly. Exactly. And you also described so perfectly the situation of letting go, in as Lyndie was talking about, the power that we claim in those moments to not take those things personally, and recognizing that any of the malicious things or unkind things that get thrown at us, it's not about us, it's about what the other person is experiencing. Just as you said, he's triggered or frustrated, or like Lyndie was saying, somebody's got a little rain cloud today, but that was his problem. And it reminds me so much too about how much power there is in the fact that no is a complete sentence. We don't have to justify ourselves in those states. Yeah, there's a lot of power in reclaiming that.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. I love that.
Speaking of time, I feel like I could talk to the two of you for hours. This is such I love everything that we're talking about, and I want to be respectful of your time and be mindful. It has been such a pleasure getting to talk to you and hear your story. And I just want to thank you for your vulnerability and sharing across several miles, just coming and bringing your full self and your powerful self. I would love to be able to share with our audience anything that you feel would be helpful for them to get in touch with you, for them to tap into your services, where they can find you.
Sure, so they can find me on all the social media platforms. I even joined TikTok. I'm turning 40 this year, okay, guys. So TikTok is not really on my realm of of social media stuff. So that was a leap for me. But yeah, you can get me on all the social media platforms and on my website, which is misostudio.com. They can just private message me through there, or My email address and all my details are on my website and my Instagram handle, which is Miso Studio. I obviously do most of my stuff here in South Africa in my studio, in person, but I do hold online coaching, which is my holistic health coaching, but obviously taken more from a mindful aspect now, and less about the nutrition and health. And I mean, this is the part that's missing when you're finding yourself in a cycle of wanting to eat better and choose better. It's about that consciousness and about that mindfulness.
Fabulous. Thank you for sharing that, Mayuri, and thank you for your time as well. And we'll also have your information in the show notes so people can go ahead and find your resources there too. And when we're not in the burnout break room, you can find me on all the socials as well, and which including TikTok, and my website editsandgreen.com for creative coaching. And for Lyndie,
You can find me at lindielarrimore.com. I'm a therapist. I do traditional outpatient therapy, but I also am a burnout coach and a certified career coach. And I do consulting to help create spaces where folks can feel safe and empowered to do their best work.
well, thank you so much for a fantastic discussion. I know we could probably talk for another hour, but we'll definitely be back for more episodes. Oh, and before I forget, our next journal prompt is how do you like to recharge? We'll be talking about other forms of clocking out and recharging our batteries and what those different types of rest can look like. So until next time,
Thanks
Thank
for
you,
having
Mayuri.
me. Thanks for having me, guys.
Thank you
thanks
for
so
being here.
much.
Thank you, Caitlin. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.